prayer. It's called Gita Dhyanam. In your text, you may find this Gita Dhyanam, it's called. We are not going to deal with the whole text of the Gita Dhyanam, but today I shall read and give a brief explanation of these verses that we are going to chant every day. The first one is Om Parthaya Pradibodhidam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gradidham Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaidam Mridavashinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim. This is the first verse. There are altogether 9 verses. It's called Gita Dhyanam. In some of your books, you find Mangala Acharana. So, in the ancient Vedic tradition, you start any auspicious program, especially teaching the ancient scriptures, with a prayer of invocation. And there are 9 verses, all in Sanskrit. We do not know who wrote these 9 verses, must have come later. The Gita text itself is placed around 3326 BC. That's the one of the most well accepted dates by historians. But this invocation must have been much later. The meaning is this. This verse addresses Gita, O Mother Ambatvam Anusandadhami, O Mother Gita, I am bowing down to you. I invoke your divine presence in my heart and in this auspicious place. And for your information, Amba means mother. One great Indian student of Bhagavad Gita was Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. He repeated one statement again and again, and the statement is this: whenever I had in my life faced any conflicts, any crisis, doubts, friction, or anything, I turned to the pages of Bhagavad Gita, and the Gita as a mother, as an affectionate mother, always comforted me. This is Gandhi's statement. And remember, Gandhi was not sitting in a cave meditating. All the time he was active. He was a politician, a saintly politician, so to speak, more or less something like Lincoln of the United States. So the verse says this. This Bhagavad Gita text was written by a great ancient sage called Vyasa. And it is placed in the middle of a much greater work called Mahabharata. So Mahabharata is considered to be the largest, most voluminous classical literature by historians. It has got more than 100,000 verses. And Gita appears in the middle of this huge classic. So, Madhya Mahabharata means it is placed right in the middle of this huge classical literature called Mahabharata. And what does Gita teach you? So, Advaita Amritavashini means it rains down blessings. Blessings, what kind of blessings? It is blessing that gives you immortality, that takes you from death to immortality, that reminds you that there is within you a divine reality, a divine spark, which is imperishable, immortal, and that is Atman, as we call in Vedanta. the all-pervading divine reality that is immanent, present in all of us, and is also all-pervading. It is a transcendental spiritual reality. So the knowledge of this Atman, that is Advaita, is the message of the Gita. And what is Advaita? Advaita tells you that the absolute reality is one. God is one. And as you evolve in your spiritual life, you feel the presence of God not only in a place of worship, but also everywhere outside the temple and church. Also, you feel the presence of God. So we feel the presence of God only inside a sacred building which we consider to be sacred, maybe a temple or a church or a Buddhist worship place or whatever it may be. But if we do not feel the presence of God outside the place of worship, then it is only the beginning of our spiritual evolution. It is not wrong, but it is only the beginning. As we advance further, we start feeling the presence of God not only inside the holy building, the temple, but also outside and everywhere. And eventually you feel, not just you believe in, but you feel and experience the presence of God as the divine reality in all of us and everywhere. So it is not an anthropomorphic God in the form of a person who creates this world and then supervises our activities. Not that concept. Of course, that is true, but there's a higher and deeper concept of God. That is, God as the all-pervading divine spark that is present in all of us. This philosophy is called Advaita, and its exponent was Shankaracharya, who lived in the 8th century AD. So the message of the Gita is the fact that humanity is one spiritual family. You may have perhaps seen an inscription outside this temple on the Filbert Street. The inscription is in Sanskrit, Ekam Sat Vipra Bagudha Vadanti. That is the inscription. What it means is, reality is one, or you may say God is one, truth is one, sages call it by different names. The whole verse is from Rigveda Samhita, Indram Mitram Varunam Agnirahu Adho Divyasa Suparno Gurutman Ekam Sat Vipra Bagudha Vadanti Agnim Yamam Matirishwanamahu. It's the ancient verse from the Vedas, Rigveda Samhita. What it means is, all these names, different names and gods and goddesses are so many names that enlightened people use to interpret the absolute reality. So this is the message of Bhagavad Gita, and it has got an important function. Bhavadveshini means, Bhava actually means the cyclic rotation of life. Vedanta and Hindu tradition believe in reincarnation and also rebirth. That's a rebirth. So we go on rotating through this endless wheel of birth, death and rebirth. But once we realize our transcendental spiritual reality, it is called enlightenment in Buddhist tradition, nirvana. It is called moksha. It is like going beyond this ocean of cyclic existence called samsara in Sanskrit. This is the simple meaning of this first verse that we are going to chant every day. Why Gita teaches this? Actually, one of the central teachings of Gita is the teaching that all religions are so many ways of looking at the same divine reality. It's the essence, the meaning of the inscription on our outside this Filbert Street you find in Sanskrit. And Gita has got an important verse. It comes in the 4th chapter and 11th verse, he says, Ye yathamam prapadyante tan tathaiva bhajameham mama varma anuvartante manushyaha partha sarvasyaha. This is a verse from the Gita. What it says is, different spiritual seekers, different religious aspirants, from different traditions, different cultures, different faith systems, when they are sincere and honest and unselfish, when they seek the truth according to their own faith system, following their own rituals, they are all actually trying to reach me. And I reach them when they are trying to reach me. When different people from different religious traditions meditate, pray, or just live a simple, unselfish life, that's also enough. One glory of Advaita is, it is not essential, it is not indispensable that you should follow a particular ritual to be spiritual. Even if you do not accept the idea of God as a creator, still if you live a pure life, you can become spiritual. That is one of the great teachings of Bhagavad Gita. So this is the first of the verses of invocation. Then I am going to chant another a very important invocation. Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marudastunnanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sankapada Kramopanishadaihi Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyana-slokas Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyandam Navidusura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha. So this verse tells you, we bow down to that divine reality who is expounded, who is taught, about whom we get a detailed exposition in the Vedic literature, in different religious traditions, and whom the sages meditate upon, whom the sages realize as their immanent divine reality within their own hearts, and who is infinite, who is beyond description, who is beyond all limits, the unlimited infinite reality. To that supreme reality, my greetings, my invocation. This is the meaning of this verse, the last of this. Now we will come to the text. I already mentioned earlier that Gita is in the form of a dialogue. So Gita is looked upon great Western and Eastern exponents and teachers. Not just a philosophical classic, it is certainly the most profound and the most important philosophical classic in Hindu tradition. But more than that, it has got a unique relevance. It is a book that we can hold in our hand. It is a book that we can hold in our left hand when we work with our right hand. So that is a uniqueness of Gita. It is a manual of our daily life. When you read Gita, you don't get teachings like, you pray to me, then everything will be wonderful. That prayer is there, no doubts. But more than that, it tells you how to develop a very comprehensive, spiritual approach to the whole business of our life in this world. When we go about doing our duties, performing our responsibilities in different workplaces, in office, in the university, in the hospital, in the factory, in the farm, plant, wherever it is, how to live a meaningful, a comprehensive life. So it expounds the philosophy of Swadharma. Now, here Swadharma means actually Swakarma, one's own duty and responsibility. Duty not as interpreted by Kant in critical practical reason, and duty or work not as approached by empiricists or pragmatists, but duty in a very comprehensive sense. How we can do our work, whatever that work may be. It may be cooking, working, teaching, studying, whatever may be. We cannot keep quiet for a minute without doing anything. Even this teaching is also a work, really speaking. So, Gita gives you a very unique approach, an approach that is comprehensive. How to live in this world without being worldly minded. No one wants to be worldly, but you have to live in the world. Once we become worldly minded, we become slaves of the world. We become slaves of the senses. That's what Gita teaches you. Remember, Gita, as I mentioned in the last class, Gita doesn't ask you to be inactive. All the great exponents of Gita were superhuman in their explosive energy with which they worked. In fact, the most profound commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, actually the man who brought Bhagavad Gita to our attention, the reason why we are reading this book today was Shankaracharya. And according to many Eastern and Western students of Vedanta, no one worked harder than him. In the last session, I gave an idea. And he's the one who expounded Gita, giving it a new relevance to our times. So it begins with a question and begins with an answer. The portrayal of a man living in this world. That man's name is Arjuna, and the student is Arjuna, the teacher is Lord Krishna. So in the first chapter of the text, 28th verse, you find a description of Arjuna's predicament. Drishtvevam swajanam Krishna yutsum samavastidam sidanti mamagatrani mukham cha parisushyadi vebadusya sharireme roma hasya jayade gandivam samsade hastattvaichaiva paridakhide. So if you please don't mind, if you don't have a text, you won't miss anything. I am just quoting these verses, chapter and the verse number, because being recorded it could be study material for that purpose only. So the 28th verse tells you this. A man who was facing a deep crisis in his personal life. He says, I am being tormented by delusion, ignorance and misunderstanding. I do not know what to do. I do not know how to do things. This is, in short, the essence of this. You find in the Gita words like Dharma-kshetra, Kurukshetra. The first verse in the Gita, first chapter is Dharma-kshetre, Kurukshetre, Samavetaha, Yutsavaha, Mamaka, Pandavaschaiva, Kim Akurvada Sanchaya. So you find the word is used, the field of war, the field of action, such words you find. The implication is our own mind. Whenever we try to undertake any important task or duty, we may be tormented by a number of doubts and conflicts and frictions. Should I do this? Should I do this way or that way? Is it my duty or not? So it's not concern about result. It is a kind more of a moral doubt. Highly evolved persons will have these doubts. Is it appropriate for me to do this work at all, or is it appropriate for me to do this work in this particular manner or in a different manner? The human mind itself is a field. Kshetra means field. So you dharma kshetra, kurukshetra, two words are used. Human mind, or the field, the mental system in which we feel a lot of conflicts, a lot of frictions, a lot of ideological problems. Those who do not have any of these problems belongs to the most exalted persons like Buddha, Christ, or Shankaracharya, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Christ did not have any doubts. He went ahead. Buddha did not have any doubt. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa did not have any doubt. They have no doubt because they transcended doubts. And those who are very primitive, they also have no doubts. They have not even evolved enough to feel any kind of inner conflict. But all normal human beings should have doubts. So if we do not have doubts, we should try to have doubts. Because that is the beginning of our evolution. When we have doubts, we are starting on a spiritual journey. We are starting on a higher evolution, not biological evolution, no more. We have exhausted that field. But there is still a lot of scope for evolution on another area. Cultural evolution, moral evolution, spiritual evolution. The journey for inner contentment, inner happiness, inner satisfaction. And we have to pay a price for it. That is, we should develop doubts, healthy doubts. That's the idea behind. So Arjuna had these doubts. That is on the first chapter, 28th verse. And the last chapter of the text is 18th chapter. In 18th chapter, 73rd verse, towards the end of the 18th chapter, Arjuna tells Krishna, Nashto moha smidir labdha tut prasadat maya achyuda sidosmi gada sandeha karishe vachanam tava. The verse is this, 73rd verse, 18th chapter. Means, now I have got rid of all my conflicts, all my doubts, all my delusions, frictions. I am totally free from all these doubts and skepticism, self-doubt, all these negative tendencies, self-defeatist ideas. No, I am totally free from all these conflicts. And then he says, Karishi Vachanantava, now I am going to act according to your instruction. So the student of Gita begins with some questions, which questions that all of us may have had to encounter in our own life. All cultured, educated, refined people will have these doubts. No doubt about it. So that's the doubt that Arjuna had. Maybe in workplace, in doing a job, in changing for a job, changing for another job, or taking up a new job. In all these situations, facing a challenging situation, we may have these doubts. And how to approach these doubts, and how to evolve a healthy approach, so that we will have absolutely no reason to repent of what we have done in the past. That's the doubt. And towards the end, Lord Krishna's instruction will come. But then Arjuna makes one point in the 18th chapter, 73rd verse, Karishe Vachanam Tava. I shall act according to your instruction. Now one may ask this question. Was Lord Krishna, was the teacher trying to enforce something on Arjuna? You do this, or you will have this problem. Actually, Krishna didn't do that. The one unique aspect of Gita is, after teaching all these 18 chapters, he taught this karma yoga, the science of unselfish action. He taught meditation, he taught prayer, he taught the ideal of renunciation, and he taught Raja Yoga, what we call. All these he taught. Meditation, prayer, unselfishness. All these he taught. And then after teaching this, Lord Krishna says, a little earlier, before Arjuna made the statement, I shall act according to your instruction, Krishna, the teacher, tells you, Ide jnanamakhyadam guhyataram maya vimursya edat aseshena yetheshasi tathakuru. That is the 63rd verse of the 18th chapter. So you have to remember, this is the beginning of this discussion, that's why I am giving this verse. I want to give a full framework of the whole text and what it deals with. It begins with some doubts and skepticism and some negativity in the mind of a person who was facing a conflict, inner conflict. And then Lord Krishna taught gave different spiritual instructions. And at the end of the text, this man who began asking questions said, I shall act according to your instruction. But before this man, Arjuna, said, I shall act according to your instruction, Lord Krishna had already made another profound statement. What is this? I have taught you this great science, which is not taught to everyone. Now you use your own power of discretion, your own discerning wisdom. So etad aseshena vimursya means after making a thorough analysis of what you have heard from me, you act as you want. Etha tum ichchasi tatha kuru. This is the prose order. That means, I have already taught you this great Bhagavad Gita. The science of developing a new approach to life and action. And now, you use your own total freedom of action, your own discretion. I am not imposing this teaching on you. You act according to your own sweet will. After listening to this, Arjuna thought for some time and said, I shall act according to your instruction. This is the framework of Bhagavad Gita, in short. Now, I shall say a few things about how Krishna, the teacher, began his instruction. Now, you can imagine an ancient civilization where a student has to be polite and humble, and a teacher should be broad-minded, but still should not impose. There's a great, you don't find such statements in many scriptures. You have heard from me what I have to teach you. Now you use your own discretion and you accept what you consider to be acceptable, and you don't listen, don't care for what you consider to be irrelevant. And the student carefully analyzed, and then he said, I shall act according to your instruction. Now, one interesting aspect of the whole text is, the teacher did not begin his instruction till the student expressed a strong desire to learn and a total willingness to listen carefully to what the teacher was going to instruct. Otherwise, teachings will not work. It's not like you go to university, you pay your tuition fees, the professor, the academic staff get their paychecks. So, it is taxpayers' money. No one gives anything. The student pays his tuition fees, everything, and many other things, and the professor gets his paycheck. So there is no need of please teach me, because nobody is learning from anyone and nobody is teaching anyone. And also, it's not very particular that you should listen carefully. The teacher also is not very particular that you should listen very carefully. And the student also is not very eager to learn, except for his own job, all that immediate. I'm giving normal. But here, spiritual instructions will not work unless we bring our mind to a state of spiritual fitness. That's a very important thing. I can ask you, I can just take one subject. All of us read Sermon on the Mount, the parables, Dhammapada, the Vedas. Many of us read Bhagavad Gita. Many of us read many wonderful scriptures. Many of us read Dostoevsky, Brothers Karamazov, which I frequently quote from. Many of us read Philokalia, the Russian Orthodox mystical literature, Way of a Pilgrim. We read Eckhart. Remember, I'm talking about Meister Eckhart of 13th century German mystic, nobody else. Remember, I'm talking about Meister Eckhart, the great Dominican monk who was arguably the greatest philosopher, mystic of Christian tradition, and whose teachings closely resemble Vedanta. The via negativa, and the God is beyond description. God cannot be explained, defined, or described. God is beyond even the Holy Trinity. God is something that cannot be named or explained in words. All that comes very close to some of the very pillars from the fundamental tenets of Advaita Vedanta. So I'm talking about Mr. Eckhart. Okay, now the point is, in all their we all study and read those books. But we get different kinds of benefits, depending upon our own little small glass or tumbler or jar with which we take water from the ocean. We imbibe, we learn with our mind. So very often we get what our mind is ready to imbibe. So we have to bring our mind to a state of spiritual fitness. You can read of those, one of the grandest examples of this principle. It's found all over Hindu tradition, but in the Christian tradition, the parable of the sower is an example. The condition of the soil is what decides the benefit, the usefulness, the utility, or the opposite of the seed that are being sown. Sower of the seed parable in the Bible. So that's what we are going to discuss now. Those of you who have the text can take the 2nd chapter, 7th verse. Now, there is a verse, a very interesting verse, in which the student expresses to what extent he is fit and ready to learn. Karpanya dosho bhagatas svabhavaha prichhami tvam dharma sammuda chetaha yet shreyasya nischidam bruhitanme Shishyastegam shanti mam tuam prapannam. This is the verse, 7th verse of 2nd chapter. So, here the student Arjuna tells the teacher, I am overwhelmed by my own misunderstanding, my faint-heartedness, and my confusion as to what my duty, what my dharma, what my responsibility, or how I should perform my responsibility is. Total confusion, self-doubt, friction, conflicts in my mind. So I am asking you, tell me exactly, definitely, what will be beneficial to me. I am here to learn from you, so please consider me as your student. And teach me what is appropriate for me. There are many things that we may like. There are certain things that we like may not be good for us. There are certain things which may be openly, obviously bad for us. But there are certain things which may guarantee our eternal well-being. That's what you should teach me. Please teach me what eventually will benefit me permanently. That's instruction I am looking for. This comes in the 7th verse of the 2nd chapter. So, Arjuna calls himself as somebody who has surrendered to the teacher. So surrender here is an old language, Sanskrit. Many of you know the Sanskrit that we are reading now is grammatical structure. It comes from 3rd millennium BC, and the standardization of Sanskrit grammar took place in 9th century BC. It's an ancient language. So the point is, surrender here means I am now raised my level of consciousness to that level where I fully understand and accept what you are going to teach me. So please teach me. This verse prompts the teacher to give the best of his instructions. Otherwise it won't work. Suppose somebody is walking in the street, you just, would you like to listen to some profound philosophical discussion? You'll be making enemies. Unless we seek something seriously, unless we raise our own level of fitness and readiness to a state where our mind is ready to imbibe and listen to the instructions do not work very well. Because such a student should look upon what he is going to learn with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, which in Sanskrit called Shraddha, Astikya Buddhi, Shankaracharya's interpretation. Shraddha means when you do something, when you listen to something, when we read something, you do that with a sense of deep integrity, concentration, and a sense of sacredness and sanctity. You attach a kind of sanctity and sacredness to what we learn. Then only that learning, what we are going to learn, will become beneficial. Otherwise, it won't become beneficial. Because when we raise the level of consciousness to that extent, it is like a fertile soil where all the seeds fall and they sprout and they become wonderful trees. Think from the biblical parable. Now, when Arjuna expressed his complete readiness and willingness to listen and practice what Lord Krishna was teaching, then Lord Krishna begins his instruction. That comes in the 11th verse of the 2nd chapter. That's the actual beginning of Gita as a philosophical classic. So Shankaracharya, who brought Gita to our attention by writing the most marvelous commentary in 8th century, he begins his exposition, his commentary is called Bhashyam in Sanskrit, only with the 11th verse of the 2nd chapter. So we will begin that text, that verse, the next session. So now we can have interaction for 10 minutes. You can ask any questions related to what we discussed today or what we discussed yesterday or anything, last session, or anything related to this text. Most welcome.
The theme is the relationship of the ego to self-surrender to divinity. What mechanisms are preventing aspects of humanity from knowing the divine?
Well, 8 billion people inhabiting this planet Earth belong to 8 billion different levels of spiritual evolution. So, when we read a holy scripture, when we try to connect with a great idea, we get what our mind is ready and willing to learn from that. That's very important. So, we can't say that one person is totally unwilling to begin the spiritual journey or evolution or to learn, or the other person is more willing. They belong to different levels of evolution. But we can speed up this evolution, we can speed up our progress by deliberately connecting our mind more and more with these great ideas. Because mind is full of ideas. Some of them are very wonderful, some of them may not be so very wonderful. So as we feed our mind more and more with the positive, constructive, spiritual ideas, mind becomes more and more ready. What we call our ego also starts its evolution. Ego should not be interpreted in the literal sense. Normally when we talk about this egoistic, we mean, actually it means, a person who defines or looks upon himself or herself just as a psychophysical mechanism, as a physical being. His or her ego will be a kind of negative arrogance. But ego in the higher sense is chittam, our own mental world, as it evolves. So, in that respect, we can't say everyone belongs to the same level of evolution. So, different people belong to different levels of evolution. That's all.
When you recite the rhythms of the Sanskrit of these verses, and they appear to be somewhat uniform throughout the Gita, is there a feeling to that rhythm that we would only know if we were to feel the rhythm as we chant it?
Yeah, words acquire a kind of spiritual potency when they are recited again and again for centuries or for several millennia by spiritual seekers. That's why, that's the whole dynamics of what we call sacred word symbol or mantra. The science of mantra shastra, is called in Sanskrit, the science of mantras. So many of these sacred sound symbols have been spiritually enriched by great sages for centuries who may have chanted, recited, or meditated upon these words. So they acquire a kind of special potency. When we listen to those sound symbols today in 2018, maybe after several centuries, when our mind is in a state of readiness to connect with it, that word symbol will manifest in a spiritual potency in our mind. So that's why words are very potent, forceful, powerful symbols really. So Sanskrit mantras are being meditated. Example, a word like Tattwamasi, Aham Brahmasmi. If you read English translation, see, thou, that thou art. Now, this, if you repeat that, if you repeat loudly, people may think something wrong with you. But if you say, I am Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am, literally if you translate in normal language, I am God. That also can be, can invite certification by psychiatrists. But the same word, in solitude, with a deep sense of sanctity and sacredness, when you repeat, which people do, and you find in many places, not Hindus only, there are any number of spiritual seekers, monks and nuns who are born in non-Hindu tradition, in Western tradition, who have repeated and who repeat with so much of sacredness and sanctity. They feel English language may be easier for them to repeat, but it doesn't produce that, because English translation has not been subjected to recitation and contemplation and meditation by sages for thousands of years. There are prayers in Christian tradition like Psalms, Jesus' prayer, which are being repeated like that, which have same spiritual potency. When you repeat with the same kind of sanctity and sacredness, you find the same, the psychology of mantras, it applies everywhere. But these word symbols have been meditated upon, contemplated upon for centuries, so they acquire a a potency that goes far beyond the literal meaning or the verbal meaning. That's a very important thing. Yeah.
Good evening, Swamiji. I was wondering if you could maybe talk about how does one go about finding their svadharma, especially
Swadharma,
in modern society where there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of choices, and any maybe sort of insight or practical suggestions on that.
So I shall try to explain this. The definition of Swadharma is Swabhava Niyatam Karma. That is Swadharma. Means certain duties, responsibilities which may have come to us by virtue of our profession, by the compulsions, demands of the needs, for example, to look after a family or society. There are many factors which may explain why we have to do certain things, certain duties, certain obligations, responsibilities. Now, how to test whether it is Swadharma or not, that's a question. When we do that, we feel a kind of inner contentment, a kind of spontaneous, natural contentment, and absolutely no confusion or conflict. Then it is your Swadharma. Because a genuine, normal human being may not be always happy doing everything. He may have to do many things which he actually may rather avoid if there is an option. But suppose he has to do or she has to do that particular duty or responsibility by virtue of an office or an obligation, duty. See Arjuna's case, for example. To give an example, Arjuna was a soldier. Now let us say, take a simple example. A soldier or policeman who has the duty to protect society from problems, people who create problems, if that person neglects his duty, well, I shall practice non-violence, then it is the opposite of Swadharma. Because even if he does it, eventually he may feel inner conflict if he's a normal, cultured person. So anything that creates conflict within our mind is a proof that it is not Swadharma. So when we do our work, and that also brings in our mind a sense of self-fulfillment, contentment, it can only be experienced, cannot be really explained in words. There are many people who are working in different areas of responsibilities and duties. Given an option, they may go for something else, but they have to do that. With that feeling, when they do, they don't feel any conflict. So there is within all of us some invisible power or divine reality that is telling us what we should do, what we should not do. So when you listen to that voice and do things, then there will be no conflict. So one proof that is Swadharma is no conflict, no inner friction, a kind of inner fulfillment. I have done what? If there's a man, a blind man, trying to cross the street, and he is looking for somebody's help, and if you can take him, guide him across, and that evening, nobody has seen, nobody is rewarding you, but if you have done something, suppose you ignored it, normal human being, refined people, which I should have done it. So, that it's its own product, that noble act of helping a person in need is its own reward. We feel we have done what I ought to have done, what I should have done. So a kind of inner fulfillment or contentment, that is the proof that it is Swadharma. Right? Yeah. Thank you. So Any more? Okay.
Swamiji, you talk about Svadharma. What about Karma Sannyasa Yoga?
Oh, Karma Sannyasa.
How does that relate to that?
Yeah, Karma Sannyasa, I will try. Now, in Vedantic interpretation, whenever the Karma Sannyasa is mentioned, what is implied is Karma Phala Sannyasa in modern. So, no one can give up work. Nahi kasikshanamabhi jadu tishtati akarma krita karyadehi avashak karma sarva pragrudijaihi gunaihi. In the 3rd chapter, Lord Krishna says, nahi kasikshanamabhi means no one can keep quiet mentally and physically, even for one split second. Even when you are sitting in an easy chair, relaxing, you are working, not physically, mentally. So can anyone really remain in a state of total inaction or inactivity, both mentally and physically, at the same time? It is an impossibility. So, what at the same time, to become, to get established in spiritual life, you have to give up work, that is stated here. So what is meant by our desire for karma phala? So karma sannyasa means karma phala sannyasa. What it means? Renunciation of the results of our actions. It is not giving up, rather renunciation of desire for enjoying the results. Mind being enslaved by the worldly desires. Give up that state of mind. That's the implication here. Gita doesn't teach world negation or life negation. Gita is teaching you this much. You live in the world, work in the world, make the best of the world, but don't be a slave of desire, sensory desire, sensual desires. Means desire of the senses, desire for enjoyments. In fact, the teacher of one of the central teachings of Bhagavad Gita was a king, and Lord Krishna gives a long list of Imam Vivasude Yogam Proktavanaham Avyam Vivaswan Manave Praha. And the 4th chapter begins like this. This ancient science of Karma Yoga, practicing or doing actions without any selfish desire, without being enslaved, mentally enslaved by the desire. This unique approach to life and action and duties and responsibilities was taught by a lineage of great kings and emperors. That's how the 4th chapter begins. Imam Vivasude Yogam, etc. So who are the teachers of this science? Kings and emperors. And what were they doing? They were working 24 hours of the day. How could they practice this yoga? So, giving up of karma doesn't mean physically giving up karma. What mean mentally giving up desire, obsessive desire. You should not be indifferent to what you are doing, but you should not be obsessed with the results of what you are doing. If you become obsessed, then a lot of anxiety, lot of worry, all the other problems will arise. That's an important point. Okay, so we'll continue discussion in the next Friday. So thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.